Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we continue in our Hebrew word study. We are in 2 Samuel chapter 2 and picking up with verse 8 today. And what we understand so far is, of course, Saul and Jonathan have died in battle. David has been anointed king by Samuel quite a while ago, and he is acting as king in Hebron, but everywhere else they have not accepted him as king, and I find this quite challenging to understand. So as we look today, we see in verse 8 that um, Abner, and so in Hebrew, you'll see where I'm circling with my cursor. It has the vav, which is a conjunction, means and or but, and then the spelling of Avner's name is Aleph, Beit, Nun, and then a Resh. And so in English, it's pronounced Abner, but in Hebrew, we see this is kind of a compound word. It is Av, the Aleph, and the Beit, and it is Ner. And so Av is father. One of the first words you learn in Hebrew is that word means father. So this is father Ner, but then he's also the Ben of Ner. So we got a lot of Ners going on here, and of course Ner, if we just highlight that, it actually means lamp or light. You'll find some Jewish synagogues have like Ner Tamid. There's one in Milwaukee that uses that name, which is the light, eternal light or existing light. And so he is the father of light, which is kind of interesting if you want to think about it that way. And he is the Sar of the Sava, and Sava is where we get Sabaoth from, would be the Lord of hosts, Lord of the armies. So you see it's used the same word here of Sava as in Sabaoth or Sabbath, Sabbat. Even though it's not Shabbat like this, the day of rest, it's a very similar sounding word, and sometimes they get confused. But this one doesn't start with an SH sound, it starts with a TS sound. The Sade gives it a sound. So it's Sabah. And so it says Saul took this guy who is Ishbosheth, as translated in English, and we're going to take a look at his name because, as you can see, there's a number. There's actually three words that go together. First is the et, which is the direct object marker, saying that all of this verse is focused on this person right here, and he is the object of this verse. Not Saul, not Abner, not Ner, but it's Ishbosheth. And of course, in Hebrew, we see it's two different words. The first one is Ish, which is the name for man. And then we have the word of Bosheth. So again, remember, Hebrew words don't always, for names, don't always mean the names that their mom and dad gave them, but it is the name that is represents their character as a way it fits into the narrative. So as we hover over this 378, we see that Bosheth means shame. So Ishboshet means a man of shame. Obviously, not a name that your mom and dad would choose for a person. So why was he called the man of shame? And why is, um, you know, Abner so intent on keeping him in this lineage and anointing him king? um, why don't they all just fall in line behind David? So there's a lot of questions here. So Abner brings Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, one of the remaining, and brings him over to these cities: Gilead, Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, tribe of Benjamin, and essentially made him king over all of Israel except the house of Judah. You'll see that there's a separation that is mentioned quite often in the Bible of the tribe of Judah, and then there's the uh, nation of Israel or tribes of Israel, and Israel would be the 10 tribes, and Judah normally gains another one in there. Right now, they're just by themselves. And so, this is just interesting, is why did they do this? Why did Abner take um, this man of shame and make him as king? And it may have something to do with just what they thought kingship was. Remember, they wanted a king to be like all other nations. So what were they going to follow? What all other nations do. And in other nations, the kingship is only transmitted through birthright. It's through the lineage of the ancestry. And so, they had a hard time shifting gears in the midst of this new stream of kingdomship, if you will, if that's a word, but you get kind of gives you a good understanding of what they're thinking of here, that, they were not used to what a king should be in God's eyes. And so they had a hard time accepting that a different person could be king without a military takeover, without, the normal things that would happen in a pagan culture. And so that's why I feel they stuck this guy in here and surrounded and rallied behind him. The other thing that's kind of interesting here, and maybe this is why he got his name, um, is that why wasn't he fighting in the battlefield with Jonathan and with Dad? Why wasn't he out there doing his share? We're going to find out that, he was 40 years old. Verse 10 says he was 40 years old. So he wasn't a young man. He wasn't an old man. He was younger than his dad, and his dad was out there fighting. So this is quite interesting. Watch for that as we continue in the story, and this guy will come up again before the story's over, and maybe we'll learn a little bit about that. But why wasn't he fighting? Is that why he was maybe called a man of shame because he ran from the battle and didn't participate? We really don't know. But we get to verse 11, and David, you know, it gives a little bit of an indication that he was king for 7 years and 6 months, while Ishbosheth was reigned for 2 years. And this is where it's challenging to look at the overlap of what's happening here as they're reigning somewhat simultaneously, but the reign of Ishbosheth doesn't last very long, and David's lasts longer. And somewhere in here in this next 7 years is when he starts acquiring and gaining the acceptance of all the other tribes, and finally the unity of the tribe of Israel and Judah together as one solidified nation. So that's a little bit there. Verse 12 goes into something quite different here, that it shows a battle that's coming up. Actually, this is civil war, as the narrative says here, that Abner, the son of Ner, and his servants of Ishbosheth of Saul, they were gathered together at Gibeon, and Joab, who was the commander of David's army, met them. Now, this doesn't mean much sense until we look at the geography of it and realize that where they were meeting at Gibeon is quite a ways away from where David was first crowned king at Hebron. And so it shows that David and his men are making inroads into the land that is supposedly under the reign of Ishbosheth. And so they're actually gaining land, they're gaining people on their side, and this is coming to kind of a battlefront here where they finally come into each other. Then verse 14 is where it gets really interesting, that they met here, and Abner says to Joab, let arise now some of the young men, Hanaarim, and then it uses a word which is 80 or 7832, and it's got a vav in front of it, so it's pronounced Vishachaku. And this is a very interesting word. The Jewish Bible that I was reading before had it translated as play. And so when I get here, it says it's compete. And when we open this up, it's very, very interesting because I'm going to do exactly what this word says. I'm going to laugh. It's going to make me laugh here that this word comes from the word for laugh. Now, you may remember that there was a person in the Bible whose name was Isaac, which in Hebrew is called Yitzhak, and it sounds a lot like shakak, and that's because it comes from the same root that Isaac's name, or Yitzhak, means laughter. And so these are tied together. Well, I got to ask myself, how does this word to laugh get put in here? And why is it translated as compete in one place and play in another place? And what even gets more interesting, and we'll look at this when we get to chapter 6, verse 21, is the same word is used for David in his display of dancing as they're bringing the Ark of the Covenant back into Jerusalem, and that his wife at the time, Michal, laughs at him for the way he's dancing before the Lord. It uses this same word of laugh, that David was laughing. And here they are laughing. And so, again, we have to understand that Hebrew is a very limited language in far as the number of words that are used. There's only about 7,500 words in what's called biblical, or sometimes classical Hebrew, and they have very different meanings. And so what we want to gain from this is that I don't think anybody intended for this little interaction here to be a very serious battle, that they were looking at it to be definitely something that would maybe, we use the word make sport. That's a word that we use, even though that can be very loosely understood as to, making sport of someone usually causes harm and humiliation to someone. It can get too rough. You kind of get the picture here. So if we translated this as making sport, and so it says, let them arise. So they arose, went over. There were, 12 of them that went from Benjamin that had followed Ishbosheth, and then there were 10 from 12 from David's. And it says, as they came together in verse 16, this got more serious than what they had intended. It doesn't say how, it just says that, and listen to how this is written. It says, each one grasped the head of his opponent and thrust the sword in his side, and all 24 of them, 12 on each team, did this simultaneously to the other 12, so that they all fell down and died in the same place. Again, this is just incredible to comprehend how this could have happened, that they all died, that no one survived, that no one protected himself, that either they were so evenly matched or that they were caught unaware. Um, I guess you got to fill in the blank because it really doesn't say. But whatever happened at the end of the day is 24 young men lost their lives in maybe what wasn't supposed to be such a dangerous thing, but yet it was between opposing armies. And verse 17, it says that after that, a fierce battle broke out, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten that day before the servants of David. So again, we'll find some very interesting things here in the Hebrew in what they say. We see this battlefield is called the field of swords, and just because of this thing happening, that again, how did it happen, and what was it like to see this occur? All we know is that it kicked off what began to be quite a rivalry, quite a battle, a civil war between David's armies and the remnant of Saul's armies, that will go on for another few years as we follow this narrative through. So we're going to stop right there today. I hope that you are enjoying these studies. If you do, please click subscribe in the little right-hand box at the bottom of the video, and then you'll get the latest edition every time they come out. So thanks again. Keep me in your thoughts and prayers as we move forward in this study today, and God bless you, and see you next week. Bye-bye.